morning, my friend. The marketplace of ideas is open. It is great to have you along. Welcome to the Greg Belfrage Show. Or is it Bizarro World? Feeling like Bizarro World, I've got to say this week. Republicans, and many of them, they are angry. They're frustrated. And so, especially over in the House of Representatives, we've seen some just cataclysmic failures of Republicans in the U.S. House this week, and so there's a lot of frustration over this. And Fox News had a great story about they said they talked to a number of different lawmakers, and Representative Jack Bergman of Michigan said, some people are frustrated. Very few people are surprised, he said. Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky, I think, had some of the best comments. At least I understood exactly what he was saying. And he was referring to this week an unmitigated disaster, he said. And he said, I don't think either of those votes moved our party or our country forward. Talking there about the impeachment of Alejandro Mayorkas, which was defeated, and then they took up a lone vote on aid to Israel, which was defeated. And so Massey saying neither of those votes moved our party or our country forward. And then he was talking about, and this is a great point, he said that former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy would not have brought the bills to the floor if he was uncertain of their passage. And he said, I don't think we would have had that vote on Israel. I mean, what did it accomplish? And then I think it was embarrassing to lose the vote on Mayorkas. And he said, and I think under McCarthy, we would have either had the votes for it or we wouldn't have voted on it. Nancy Pelosi, during the time that Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, if she didn't have the votes, she refused to bring the issues forward. Rather than suffer an embarrassing defeat, if she didn't have the votes, until she was absolutely certain the Democrats had the votes, she wouldn't bring measures forward. And I hope this is a big learning lesson here for House Speaker Mike Johnson, because this is bringing these bills forward and then losing that's just. And he says Speaker Johnson did talk about this, and he says that Mayorkas will be impeached despite this setback. And I'll share those comments in a moment. So he's saying, yeah, it will happen. I know he's new to the job, and you want to give him time, but, right from the get-go, unless you are absolutely certain, that seems to be, that would be a great place to start. Do you know what I mean? New to the job, understandable, get it, but unless you're certain you can win, why take the vote? That just, I think Representative Massey is right, because that kind of defies common sense. Others reacting, Representative Nancy Mace of South Carolina, said this is a defining moment for our nation, and we have the policies to fix this situation, and you're going against those policies? I don't know how you go home with that. Having cast that vote, she said, I made the right vote. I'm voting the will of the people. The people who voted against that, Democrats and Republicans alike, they have to take that home. And that's much what, the sentiments of Senator Rand Paul I was sharing with you yesterday, and what Rand Paul was saying in terms of, the over in the Excuse me. I'm dealing with some audio issues here. Over in the Senate, frustrated about, and we'll get back to the Senate here in a moment because there's still a lot of frustration over the border security bill. We'll talk about that in a moment. But just an incredible amount of frustration out there. Freshman Representative Mike Collins of Georgia was especially concerned about the failure of the Mayorkas impeachment. He said, we should have taken that sorry rascal out, he said. And then he said he didn't see a difference between House Republican status under McCarthy versus Johnson. He said it's basically the same. And to Johnson's credit, man, he was voted in. He was already behind the eight ball. So he's going to have to take a few shots to get back into position. Yeah, really? I mean, some of these things, again, I think unless you're certain you've got the votes, we've counted the votes, we've got the votes. Unless you're certain you have the votes, why are you taking these? Why are you moving forward? I think that defies common sense for me. So you got to believe then that there's just incredible frustration in regard to all of this. So I mentioned House Speaker Mike Johnson, and he said, he was speaking to reporters on Capitol Hill yesterday morning. And he said, last night was a setback, but democracy is messy. Yeah, democracy is messy, but I don't know that, come on, give me a break. Democracy is messy. Yeah, democracy is messy, and it can be tough to do some of these things. No question about that. But you're the Speaker of the House, right? You're the Speaker of the House. We're talking about bringing these votes forward. If you don't have the votes, why are you bringing the votes forward? If we're not ready yet. Because some were saying, well, we got to wait for Steve Scalise. Scalise is undergoing cancer treatments, as you know. So he was gone. And they were saying, well, we got to wait till Scalise gets back, and then we'll try again. Then why not do that in the first place? Because don't you feel, I've got a feeling that they're just making it up on the fly as they go. And you cannot run a majority that way. You just can't. You can't. So it's, I don't know, moving on those votes and then having both of them fail just make Republicans look stupid, incredibly stupid. And I don't think that's the case at all. I ran across a piece this morning at National Review. Jim Garrity's got a piece. The self-defeating Republican Party. I went, yep, exactly right. And he said, on the menu today, the Democrats wake up every morning wanting to beat the Republicans, but they'll never be as good at beating the Republicans as the Republicans are at beating themselves. Yeah. And sadly, he's absolutely right about this. And he said, let's just run down the last few days in Republican news. After spending months insisting that U.S. aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan had to be tied to a border security proposal, House Republicans declared the proposal negotiated by the Senate dead on arrival. And then he talked about the GOP House leadership's next move, attempt to pass a standalone bill for aid for Israel. That failed. The Republican effort to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, failed Tuesday night. And it just goes on. He just goes on. And Garrity is absolutely right. Daily Mail's got a piece. The Senate will vote to move the border package. Then, what the latest on this is now, right? The Senate, the U.S. Senate now, getting set to vote on funding for Israel and Ukraine, but no money for the border. And that's just, I think, infuriating to some. So they were trying to debate this yesterday, and Senator Schumer basically shut things down and said, "Well, let's give Republicans the night to think on this and to try to reconsider," he said. So he told members of his caucus in the White House last week that if Republicans scuttled the bipartisan border and the supplemental agreement, he had prepared a plan to use the motion to reconsider to force Republicans to vote on the foreign aid without the border. So now the Senate is going back, voting on this foreign aid with no money for the border. I can't imagine you're too excited about that. We'll talk about it a little bit this morning because that's so they're just taking the border out, and we still want to pass this money for Israel and Ukraine. And as I have said many, many times, the Democrats are not concerned about funding for Israel. It's the funding for Ukraine. It's that Ukraine funding that they just refuse to give up on. And I think Senator Schumer's comments yesterday really show that. Other stories this morning, Nikki Haley yesterday going after Donald Trump. As I mentioned to you yesterday, it was one of the stories that was trending. In Nevada, she lost to none of the above. And she was the only one on the ballot. Donald Trump wasn't on the Republican ballot. And so she lost to none of the above. And so Nikki Haley said, it's ironic for somebody who says that the election was stolen from him, he's now showing that he's going to bully his way to try and win this election. Now, wait a minute. Is Nikki Haley is she surprised that politics are being played in politics? I mean, that's how it sounds to me. This is absolutely absurd, and I'm not the only one who is just laughing. Matt Vespa's got a piece at townhall.com this morning. Nikki Haley's explanation for her crushing Nevada loss is pathetic. Yeah. She's saying, this is a story from CBS News. And this was a coordinated effort. Now listen to this. This is CBS News. And they say, caucus captains for Donald Trump told CBS News that they encouraged their supporters to check the box for none of these candidates on the Nevada primary ballot. And they talked to one Trump caucus captain, and she said, I tell people if they want to vote for Trump, they have to go to the caucus and to vote none of the above. If they are a Haley candidate, I say go ahead. But if you want to vote for Trump, you have to go to the caucus. And so this is what they're telling people. Now, does that sound like a gun's being put to anybody's head? I mean, she's telling people if they want to vote for Trump, go to the caucus and vote for none of the above. So what this shows is, really, honestly, and she's criticizing Trump, and she is become almost as shrill to my ears as Hillary Clinton does. I mean, she is just, the more she's under pressure, the more, angry and bitter. And I think when folks are under real pressure, they start to show you who they really are. They really do. When you're under pressure. And because I ask myself that question all the time, something that's like, okay, I'm feeling this weight, whatever it is. And it's like, I always take a moment to stop and ask myself, I've got to think about this. I've got to, what kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to be perceived? I don't think Nikki Haley asks herself that. And so she's downplaying her loss in Nevada and, blaming it on Trump. Now, again, the Trump caucus captains saying, hey, you want to vote for Trump? Vote none of the above. If you're a Haley candidate, go ahead. But if you want to vote for Trump, you have to go to the caucus. That's just the political game. I mean, and Nikki Haley is bawling like a baby over this. It's just absolutely incredible. Other big stories this morning. This is really an horribly unfortunate story about the death of a baby during delivery that's been ruled a homicide. And so two parents are suing a hospital that say the hospital did not tell them that their son had been decapitated during birth last year. So the medical examiner's office said the cause of death was a broken neck from human action. So, in other words, someone broke the neck of this baby. And it's just heartbreaking. Mr. Taylor accused the doctor who delivered the baby and the hospital of lying to them, not allowing them to see their son. And they said, we just want justice for our son, he said. They lied to us. They ain't let us touch him. We didn't like it. So his wife was there with him. She was too upset to speak, as you might imagine. Just an incredibly tragic story. Also, the FBI has arrested a Tennessee man who said he wanted to kill migrants at the southern border. So he was arrested for possession of an unregistered firearm. And court documents show that a nearly year-long investigation into this man involved undercover agents. So he wanted to kill migrants at the border. Apparently, he was working along those lines. Hillary Clinton is reacting to Tucker Carlson's recent announcement that he had secured an interview with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and she referred to Carlson as a useful idiot. And she said of Carlson, he says things that are not true. He parrots Vladimir Putin's pack of lies about Ukraine, so I don't see why Putin wouldn't give him an interview, she said. So he's a useful idiot. And when I hear comments like that, I'm like, really, you're one to talk? I mean, there are a couple of other stories. Donald Trump on Truth Social earlier this week was saying, Anheuser-Busch over the whole Bud Light and Dylan Mulvaney controversy, he was asking people to give Bud Light a second chance, he said. Trump said this. He said, it's time to move on from the outrage over the ads. We'll talk about that in more detail this morning. I'm curious to get your thoughts on it. And I have been intrigued by this over the last few days. The baseball is no longer America's pastime. Now America's pastime, football. Football has replaced baseball as America's pastime, according to a new survey. So, in other words, people say it's football that is America's sport over baseball. Kind of interesting. We'll talk about that. I'm curious to get your thoughts. And it's a quick look at the big stories this morning.